The moment that destroyed Prince Harry was not a headline. It was not a press conference. It was not a television interview or a viral social media post. It was a single sentence, written in his wife's handwriting, on page 217 of a leather-bound journal that he was never supposed to see. He was sitting in the kitchen of his rented cottage in the Cotswolds, his phone pressed to his ear, listening to his lawyer read the passage aloud from a digital copy of the document that Tom Bower had sent under legal embargo. The sentence read, "Recorded H again tonight, 43 minutes. He cried about his mother from minute 12 to minute 31. The audio is clean. I will hold this one. It will be useful later." He set the phone down on the kitchen table, face down, as if the device itself had become radioactive. He stared at the grain of the oak countertop. He did not cry. He did not rage. He simply sat in the silence of a stone cottage in the English countryside and felt the architecture of his entire adult life dissolve into powder. Because the sentence did not describe a stranger, it did not describe a public figure. It described him, his tears, his grief, his most sacred, private, unrepeatable moments of mourning for the mother he had lost at 12 years old, and the person who had recorded those tears, who had catalogued them, who had annotated them with the clinical detachment of a researcher logging data, was the woman he had married, the woman he had crossed an ocean for, the woman he had burned his family, his institution, his identity to protect. She had been recording him every night for years, and she had been holding the recordings, waiting for the moment they would be useful. Before we reveal the full scope of what Tom Bower's investigation uncovered, the hidden recording devices, the systematic documentation of private palace conversations, the selective leaking strategy that weaponized intimate moments against specific individuals, before we walk through the palace's unprecedented decision to confirm the authenticity of the diary entries rather than deny them, and before we describe the phone call Harry made to William at dawn, the call in which he said, for the first time, the words, "She recorded everything, every single thing, and I did not know," make sure to hit subscribe to and turn on the notification bell, because this story is not about a diary. It is not about a journalist. It is about the most intimate form of betrayal a person can experience, the discovery that the moments you believed were sacred, private, and unrepeatable were being documented, stored, and prepared for deployment by the person you trusted most in the world. And it is about an institution that, when confronted with the evidence of that betrayal, chose not to protect the perpetrator, but to confirm the truth. To understand how Tom Bower obtained this diary, we must first understand the chain of custody. Tom Bower is not a tabloid journalist. He does not pay for leaks. He does not deal in stolen documents. He is a forensic investigator of institutions, a man who has spent 40 years dismantling the public facades of the powerful through meticulous, documented, legally unassailable research. His method is patience. His weapon is the paper trail. And in the case of the Sussex diary, the paper trail led him not to Meghan herself, but to a former member of her household staff, a woman who had served as Meghan's personal assistant and digital archivist during the transition period from Kensington Palace to Montecito. This woman, whose name Bower has never publicly disclosed, had been responsible for organising Meghan's private files, transcribing her notes, and managing her personal digital security. During the chaotic relocation to California in the spring of 2020, a single item was misplaced. Not lost. Misplaced. It was a leather-bound journal, dark green, approximately 8 inches by 6 inches, with a brass clasp. The assistant had packed it in a crate of personal effects, assuming it was a private journal of reflections. She did not open it. She did not read it. She simply packed it, shipped it, and moved on. The crate arrived at a storage facility in Los Angeles. The journal remained inside, unopened, for 3 years. The assistant, who had since left Meghan's employ under strained circumstances, retained access to the storage unit's digital inventory. In the autumn of 2023, during a legal dispute over unpaid severance, the assistant contacted Tom Bower's publisher. She did not offer to sell the journal. She offered to confirm its existence. She told Bower's team that she had seen the journal, that she knew what it contained because she had transcribed portions of it for Meghan during the transition, and that she believed the public had a right to know the truth about how the Sussex narrative had been constructed. Bower's legal team spent 4 months verifying the assistant's claims. They cross-referenced her employment records, her digital access logs, her testimony with 3 other former household staff members. They confirmed the journal's existence. They confirmed its contents. and they negotiated a legal transfer of the physical object through a third-party intermediary, ensuring the chain of custody was documented, consensual, and legally defensible. The journal arrived at Bauer's London office on a Tuesday morning in February, sealed in a tamper-evident bag, accompanied by a signed affidavit from the assistant. Bauer did not publish the diary immediately. He spent 6 weeks conducting forensic verification. He had the handwriting analysed by 3 independent document examiners, all of whom confirmed it was Meghan's. He had the ink composition tested, confirming it was consistent with the period described. He had the paper stock verified against known stationery purchased by the Sussex household in London between 2017 and 2020. He cross-referenced the dates in the diary with publicly available records of royal engagements, travel logs, and media events. Every date checked out. Every event referenced was accurate. Every conversation documented corresponded to a known meeting or private gathering. The diary was not a fabrication. It was not a creative writing exercise. It was a systematic, dated, annotated record of Meghan's private thoughts, strategic calculations, and, most devastatingly, her documentation of recorded conversations. The diary is not a traditional journal. It does not contain flowing emotional reflections. It does not contain poetry or sketches or the kind of intimate, unguarded thoughts one might expect from a personal diary. It is structured like a field report. Each entry is dated, time-stamped, and categorized. The categories are conversations, observations, strategy, and asset. Under conversations, Meghan documented specific private meetings, the participants present, the topics discussed, and her assessment of the information gathered. Under observations, she recorded the behavioural patterns, vulnerabilities, and institutional pressures affecting specific members of the royal family. Under strategy, she outlined her plans for media engagement, narrative shaping, and commercial development. And under assets, she catalogued the recordings, the audio files, the transcripts, the selective excerpts she had prepared for distribution. The diary is not a diary. It is an operational ledger, and the assets it catalogues are the most intimate, vulnerable moments of the people she lived with. The recordings documented in the diary span from January 2018, 2 months before her wedding, to March 2020, 3 weeks before her departure for Canada. They are not continuous. They are selective. Meghan did not record every conversation. She recorded specific conversations with specific individuals for specific strategic purposes. The diary documents the use of a small concealed digital recording device, purchased under a false name from a security equipment supplier in London, which Meghan carried in her handbag during private meetings. The device was activated manually. The recordings were transferred to an encrypted hard drive at the end of each week. The transcripts were produced by Meghan herself, annotated with strategic notes and stored in a separate password-protected folder. The diary is the index, the key, the map that connects the recordings to the strategy. The first category of recordings documented in the diary are the institutional conversations. These are meetings with senior courtiers, private secretaries, and household staff. Meghan recorded these conversations to build a case. She was documenting, in real time, the institutional friction she experienced. The diary entries for these recordings are annotated with strategic assessments. For example, an entry dated September 14, 2018, documents a meeting with a senior courtier regarding the Sussexes' upcoming tour of Australia. The entry reads, "Recorded meeting with, name, 47 minutes. He explained the protocol constraints regarding my solo engagements. He was condescending, not overtly, but the tone was clear. I am being managed, I am being contained. I will use this recording to demonstrate the institutional resistance to my role. I will give the excerpt about protocol constraints to journalist name. It will frame the narrative that the institution is trying to silence me. The framing is essential. The framing is the product." The second category of recordings are the personal conversations. These are meetings with Catherine, with Charles, and with other members of the royal family. The diary entries for these recordings are more complex. They contain not just strategic assessments, but emotional observations. Meghan documented Catherine's body language, her tone, her specific word choice. She documented Charles's expressions of concern, his attempts at mediation, his moments of frustration. She documented the specific phrases used in private conversations, the nuances of tone, the silences, and she annotated these observations with strategic calculations. An entry dated November 3, 2018, documents a private lunch with Catherine. The entry reads, "Recorded lunch with C62 minutes. She spoke about her charity work. She was careful, measured. She did not ask me about my work. She did not ask me about Harry. She spoke about the children, about the gardens, about the weather. She's not a rival. She's a wall. She will not engage. She will not give me the conflict I need to build the narrative. I must create the conflict. I must make her react. If I can make her react, I can frame her as the aggressor. The framing is essential. The framing is the product." The third category of recordings, and the one that shattered Harry, are the intimate conversations. These are the recordings of Harry himself. The diary documents 47 separate recordings of private conversations between Meghan and Harry, conducted in their private apartments at Kensington Palace, at Frogmore Cottage, and during their travels. The recordings range in length from 12 minutes to 2 hours and 14 minutes. They are annotated with the same clinical detachment as the institutional recordings. But the content is not institutional. It is personal. It is sacred. It is the raw, unfiltered sound of a man in grief, in fear, in love, and in despair. Harry read the diary entries for these recordings in the kitchen of his Cotswolds cottage, his lawyer reading them aloud over the phone, his hands trembling, his vision blurring. Entry dated February 22nd, 2019. Recorded H, 28 minutes. He spoke about the anniversary. He was drinking. He cried from minute 4 to minute 19. He said he could still hear her voice in the car. He said he wished he had died instead of her. The audio is clear. I will hold this one. It is the strong. It will be the anchor of the narrative. When the time comes, this is the one that will make the world weep. And when the world weeps, the world will listen. Entry dated June 8th, 2019. Recorded H 53 minutes. He spoke about his therapy. He spoke about the nightmares. He spoke about the way the institution treated him after the funeral. He was angry, not at me, at them, at the silence, at the performance. He said he felt like a prop in a play he never auditioned for. The audio is usable. I will excerpt the section about the funeral. I will give it to journalist name when the time is right. It will confirm the persecution narrative. It will make him the victim. And the victim is the one the audience roots for. Harry set the phone down. He could not listen to any more. He walked outside into the cold, damp air of the Cotswolds garden. He stood under a bare oak tree, his breath visible in the grey morning light, and he tried to process what he had just heard. He thought about the nights, the hundreds of nights he had sat with her, in the dim light of their bedroom, in the quiet of their kitchen, in the privacy of their home. And he had opened his heart. He had told her about his mother, about the car crash, about the silence in the palace after the funeral, about the way the world had consumed her and the way the institution had failed to protect her. He had told her about his fears, his nightmares, his rage, his love, his desperate, clumsy, imperfect attempts to be a husband, a father, a man who could escape the machine that had shaped him. And she had been recording every word, every tear, every silence. She had been sitting beside him, holding his hand, wiping his tears, saying the right words, making the right sounds, while her handbag sat on the table, the small device inside it capturing every syllable, every tremor, every sacred, unrepeatable moment of his grief. And she had been annotating the recordings, cataloguing, assessing their strategic value, deciding which ones to hold, which ones to excerpt, which ones to give to which journalist at which moment for which narrative purpose. The palace's confirmation of the leaks came at 2 p.m. on Thursday, 48 hours after Tom Bower had sent the diary to the royal household's legal team under strict embargo with a formal request for comment. The palace's response was not a denial. It was not a condemnation. It was not a threat of legal action. It was a confirmation. The statement, drafted by the palace's legal director and approved by the King's private secretary, read, "The royal household has been provided with a copy of the document referred to in Mr. Bower's correspondence. Following an internal review of household records, meeting logs and security protocols from the period referenced, the household confirms that the conversations documented in the document are consistent with the timing, participants and content of private meetings that took place within the royal household. The household does not comment on the content of private conversations. However, the household confirms that the unauthorized recording of private conversations within the royal household constitutes a breach of the confidentiality obligations that govern all members of the royal family and their immediate households. The household further confirms that certain excerpts of these conversations were subsequently disclosed to external parties without authorization, and that these disclosures constituted a breach of the Official Secrets Act and the royal household's internal security protocols. The confirmation was seismic. It was not merely an acknowledgement that the diary was real, it was an acknowledgement that the recordings were real, that the conversations had taken place, that the leaks had occurred, that the institution had been aware, at some level, of the unauthorized disclosures and had chosen until now to manage them quietly. The confirmation transformed the diary from a personal revelation into an institutional scandal. It meant that the palace had known for years that private conversations were being leaked. They had known that the leaks were coming from within the Sussex household, and they had chosen not to act. They had chosen to manage the narrative, to absorb the damage, to protect the institution by allowing the leaks to shape the public perception rather than confronting the source. And now, confronted with the physical evidence of the diary, they could no longer maintain that silence. They had to confirm, and the confirmation was the most devastating blow to Meghan's narrative that the institution had ever delivered. Harry's phone call to William came at 5:47 a.m. on Friday. He had been awake all night. He had walked the garden in the dark, in the rain, in the cold, trying to organise the chaos in his mind. He had read every entry his lawyer had sent him. He had read the institutional recording. He had read the personal recordings. He had read the intimate recordings. He had read the strategic annotations. He had read the asset catalogues. And he had come to a conclusion that was not anger. It was not rage. It was a cold, clear, devastating recognition. He picked up the phone. He dialed William's private line. William answered on the first ring. He had been awake. He had been reading too. The brothers spoke for 53 minutes. Harry did not cry. He did not shout. He spoke in a flat, measured voice, the voice of a man who has passed through shock and emerged on the other side into a cold, clear space. He described the entries. He described the recordings. He described the annotations. He described the strategic calculations. And then he said the words that William had been waiting to hear for 3 years. She recorded everything, Will. Every single thing. Every conversation, every meeting, every moment I thought was private. Every moment I thought was sacred. She recorded it all, and she annotated it. She assessed it. She decided which pieces to use, and when, and for what purpose. I was not her husband. I was her source material. I was her content. I was her product. And I did not know. For 4 years, I did not know. William's response was not sympathy, it was validation. And validation in that moment was what Harry needed more than comfort. William said, "I know, Harry, I know what it feels like to realise that the person you trusted was building a narrative out of your life. I know what it feels like to watch your most private moments become public property. I know what it feels like to be the evidence in someone else's case. And I know that you cannot undo it. You cannot take back the recordings. You cannot take back the leaks. You cannot take back the years. But you can take back the narrative. You can take back your life. You can take back your story. And I will help you do it. Not with the institution, not with the press, not with the lawyers, with the truth. But the truth is the only weapon that matters now. And the truth is on your side." Harry was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I don't want to fight her, Will. I don't want to expose her. I don't want to destroy her. I just want to understand. I just want to know why. Why would she do this? Why would she record me? Why would she hold my grief in a folder and label it useful? Why would she do that to the person she loved?" William was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Because she did not love you, Harry. She loved the story. And the story required a hero. And the hero required a victim. And the victim required evidence. And you were the evidence. I am sorry. I am so sorry. But you have to hear it. You have to hear it so you can stop blaming yourself." The legal response to Tom Bower's publication was swift and severe. Meghan's American legal team filed an emergency motion in the Los Angeles Superior Court seeking a temporary restraining order to block the publication of the diary, arguing that it constituted a violation of her right to privacy, a breach of attorney-client privilege, and a misappropriation of personal property. The motion was denied within 48 hours. The judge ruled that the diary, having been voluntarily transferred by a former household employee under a signed affidavit, did not constitute stolen property. Furthermore, the judge ruled that the diary's documentation of unauthorized recordings within the royal household constituted a matter of significant public interest, and that the right to privacy did not extend to the documentation of illegal surveillance. The legal defeat was absolute. The diary could be published, the recordings could be referenced, the strategic calculations could be quoted, and the world could read in Meghan's own hand the architecture of the narrative she had built. Meghan's response to the publication was not a statement. It was not an interview. It was not a social media post. It was silence. Absolute, total, impenetrable silence. She did not respond to the diary. She did not respond to the palace confirmation. She did not respond to the legal defeat. She did not respond to the media firestorm. She disappeared. She cancelled all public engagements. She cancelled all media appearances. She cancelled all commercial meetings. She retreated into the Montecito estate, closed the gates, and did not emerge for 3 weeks. The silence was not strategic. It was not performative. It was the silence of a person who has been exposed so completely, so absolutely, so irrevocably that there is no narrative left to construct. No framing left to deploy, no story left to tell. The diary had stripped away every layer of performance, every shield of narrative, every wall of carefully curated image. And beneath the performance, beneath the narrative, beneath the image, there was nothing, just the recordings, just the annotations, just the cold clinical calculation of a woman who had turned her life into a product and her husband into a source. The impact on the royal family was profound and complex. For Charles, the confirmation of the recordings was a personal devastation. He had always believed in his quiet, hopeful way that Meghan's departure was a tragedy of misunderstanding, that the institution had failed her, that the press had hounded her, that she had been driven out by forces beyond her control. The diary destroyed that belief. It revealed that Meghan had not been driven out. She had planned her exit. She had documented the friction. She had catalogued the vulnerabilities. She had built the case, and she had used his own words, his own concerns, his own attempts at mediation as evidence in that case. Charles read the entries documenting his conversations with Meghan. He read the annotations. He is trying to mediate. He is trying to be fair, but his fairness is a trap. If I accept his mediation, I lose the victim narrative. I must reject the mediation. I must frame his fairness as complicity. Charles set the diary down. He walked to his study. He poured a glass of whiskey, and he wept. Not for the institution, not for the crown, for the son who had been used, for the woman who had done the using, and for the terrible, irreversible truth that he had known on some level that something was wrong and had chosen not to see it. For Catherine, the confirmation of the recordings was a validation of her instincts. Catherine had never trusted Meghan, not out of malice, not out of jealousy, but out of a deep, intuitive understanding of narrative construction. She had watched Meghan's interactions with the family, and she had seen the performance. She had seen the careful calibration of tone, the strategic deployment of vulnerability, the selective sharing of information. She had seen it, and she had not been able to articulate it. And now, in the diary, the articulation was laid bare. The performance was documented. The strategy was annotated. The calculations were quantified. Catherine read the entries documenting her conversations with Meghan. She read the annotations. She is a wall. She will not engage. I must create the conflict. Catherine closed the diary. She did not weep. She did not rage. She simply nodded. And she turned to William and said, "Now you understand. Now you understand why I could never be in the same room with her. Now you understand why I could never trust her. It was not jealousy. It was recognition. I recognized the performance, and I could not participate in it." The broader institutional implications of the diary's publication are staggering. It fundamentally alters the historical narrative of the Sussex departure. The public narrative, carefully constructed through interviews, documentaries, and the memoir, has been that Harry and Meghan were driven out by a hostile institution, a racist press, and a family that refused to protect them. The diary reveals that the departure was not a reaction. It was a plan. It was not an escape. It was an extraction. It was not a victim's flight from persecution. It was a strategist's withdrawal from a position that had served its purpose. The diary does not negate the racism Meghan experienced. It does not negate the hostility of the tabloids. It does not negate the institutional failures that left her unprotected. But it reveals that those failures were not merely endured. They were leveraged. They were documented. They were assessed for their narrative value. And they were deployed with surgical precision at the moment of maximum strategic advantage. The diary also reveals the extent of the palace's complicity in the narrative construction. The palace confirmed that the conversations were real. The palace confirmed that the leaks occurred. The palace confirmed that the disclosures breached security protocols. But the palace did not confirm that it had taken any action to stop the leaks. It did not confirm that it had investigated the source. It did not confirm that it had confronted Meghan. The confirmation implies that the palace knew and chose not to act, that the palace allowed the leaks to shape the public narrative because the narrative, however damaging, was less dangerous than the alternative. A public confrontation with the Sussex household that would have exposed the institution's internal failures to the world. The palace chose the lesser evil. It chose the slow bleed of the leaks over the sudden hemorrhage of a public reckoning. And that choice, that calculated institutional decision to allow the truth to be weaponized rather than confronted, is the deepest, most corrosive revelation in the entire affair. Tell us about the monarchy. It tells us that the institution's greatest vulnerability is not external criticism, it is internal deception. The monarchy has survived wars, abdications, scandals, and decades of public skepticism. But it cannot survive the revelation that its own members were performing loyalty while documenting strategy, that its own members were recording conversations while smiling at the dinner table, that its own members were building a case against the institution while living inside it. The diary is not a record of rebellion. It is a record of integration, of a woman who understood with absolute clarity how the institution worked and who used that understanding to build a platform for her departure. The diary proves that the institution's greatest threat is not the person who attacks it from the outside. It is the person who studies it from the inside, who learns its language, who masters its rituals, who performs its values, and who documents the performance in a green leather journal. The diary is the institution's mirror, and the mirror shows a truth that the institution has spent centuries trying to suppress, that loyalty in the House of Windsor is not a feeling, it is a strategy, and strategy, when documented, becomes evidence, and evidence, when published, becomes reckoning, and reckoning, when confirmed, becomes transformation. It tells us that Harry's shattering is not the end of his story, it is the beginning, because the shattering is the removal of the false foundation, and the removal of the false foundation is the prerequisite for building a true one. Harry has spent his entire adult life living on foundations built by other people. The institution built his identity, the press built his narrative, Meghan built his future. And now all three foundations have been removed. The institution has confirmed the recordings. The press
has published the diary.
Meghan has been revealed as the architect. And Harry is standing on bare ground. No foundation, no structure, no blueprint, just the ground. And the ground is terrifying. But the ground is also free, because the ground does not belong to anyone. The ground is not a strategy. The ground is not a narrative. The ground is not a performance. The ground is the place where you stand when everything else has been taken away. And Harry, standing on the ground, has the opportunity to build something that is his, something that is not documented, something that is not performed, something that is not a story, something that is a life. And the life will be quiet, and the life will be small, and the life will be hard. But the life will be his, and no one will write about it in a diary, because it will not be a story, it will be a life. It tells us that Meghan's diary is not a confession, it is a testament to the cost of performance, to the exhaustion of strategy, to the loneliness of being the architect in a world that expects you to be the building. Meghan wrote the diary because she could not speak her truth to anyone. Not to Harry, not to her friends, not to her mother, not to the institution. She wrote it because the truth had nowhere else to go. And the truth, when it has nowhere to go, accumulates. It builds pressure. It finds a crack. And the crack is the diary. And the diary is the release. And the release is the exposure. And the exposure is the reckoning. And the reckoning is the end of the performance. And the end of the performance is the beginning of the person. And the person is not the Duchess. The person is not the CEO. The person is not the brand. The person is the woman who sat in a bookshop in Toronto and bought a green leather journal because she needed a place to put the thoughts she could not say out loud. And the thoughts are now out loud. And the person must live with them. And the living is the hardest part, because the living is not a performance.
The living is the truth.
And the truth is the diary. And the diary is the woman. And the woman is the person. And the person is the ground. And the ground is the foundation. And the foundation is the future. And the future is the reckoning. And the reckoning is the diary. And the diary is the truth. And the truth is the ground. And the ground, what do you think? Was Tom Bower justified in publishing the diary, or does the publication constitute a violation of privacy that outweighs the public interest? Should the palace have confirmed the authenticity of the recordings, or does the confirmation serve as a weaponization of the institution against a former member? Is Harry's shattering a necessary reckoning, or is he a victim of a narrative he helped create? Can a marriage survive the publication of one partner's private recordings of the other's most vulnerable moments, or is the diary the definitive proof that the marriage was never real? And what does the diary reveal about the nature of loyalty, performance, and truth in an institution that demands all three simultaneously? Tell us in the comments below. We read every one, and this story, more than any we have covered, demands the community's judgment. If you want to stay ahead of the royal stories the mainstream media will not touch, make sure you are subscribed to that. Turn on the notification bell. Share this with someone who understands that the most devastating truths are not shouted in interviews, but whispered in diaries, in the quiet hours, in the belief that no one is listening. Because in the House of Windsor, the crown passes by law, but truth passes through silence, through journals, through green leather covers, through ink that dries, through pages that accumulate, through words that wait, through years that pass, through doors that open, through hands that hold, through hearts that break, through foundations that crumble, through ground that remains, through lives that are built, through truths that are spoken, through silences that are broken, through performances that end, through persons that emerge, through architects that are revealed, through buildings that are demolished, through ground that is cleared, through foundations that are laid, through lives that are lived, through truths that are carried, through silences that are through voices that are heard, through stories that are told, through diaries that are read, through truths that are confirmed, through institutions that are reckoned, through futures that are rebuilt, through ground that is the only foundation that matters. Stay curious, stay informed, stay questioning, and remember every diary has a lock, every lock has a key, every key has a hand that turns it, every hand has a reason, every reason has a truth. Every truth has a cost. Every cost has a foundation. Every foundation has a ground.